offensive glass here in the fourth quarter. Great board.
You lost. You failed. Loser! I don't even play basketball and I would have made that shot. And even if I didn't make that shot, I'd have did something funny. You know, I'd have did something funny. Clark was like, hey, let's all do this hoop code and hand point.
But just 35% from three after a couple years in the 40s. Howard misses that one.
Ryan Howard or Alicia Gray, I think Ryan Howard, airballs a shot to win the game late. It lands in Angel Reese's lap, and collectively the whole world said, yeah, she ain't making that. Collectively, the whole world said, oh, Angel Reese has it? Oh, and it's a layup? Yeah, she's breaking that. And lo and behold, point blank range to win the game, we get a classic Angel Reese pray up and a...
Angel Reese had the game in her hands, then dropped it. Not in a close contest where the degree of difficulty justified the miss. Not on a turnaround fadeaway with a defender draped across her shooting arm in the final seconds of a nationally televised rivalry game. If you're enjoying the video so far, take a second to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. On a point-blank putback layup, at the rim, with the game tied, with 3 seconds left. The kind of shot that gets made in pickup games, in practice, in warm-ups, before the arena has even filled up.
Clark laughing at Angel Reese after she missed a wide-open layup for the win. Quarter. Great board, just could not convert it.
Was pushed under the hoop just enough to not have a great angle. To OT we go.
She was standing under the rim with her hands on her head while Caitlin Clark...
The kind of shot that every player in professional basketball converts at a rate that makes missing it genuinely shocking when it happens in a moment that size. And it clanked short, flat, not even close to the front rim. The ball bounced away, a second desperate attempt from a teammate got swatted into the stands, and the game went to overtime.
Angel Reese, you had me laughing at you, girl. I told you, Angel Reese is a pure bum, the worst kind. Angel Reese is the type to steal the trash off your curb and try to see if she can go put it in her refrigerator. The girl can't make a layup to save her life. She missed like 7 layups in the first quarter. Meanwhile, me, the GOAT, Caitlin Clark, I'm putting on shows every single night. 26 points, 9 assists. Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever humiliate Angel Reese. Or maybe Angel Reese just humiliated herself, as the Indiana Fever go on to win. 29 points, 9 assists. Am I looking like the...
And Caitlin Clark, who had just absorbed a forearm to the neck earlier in the same game without getting the benefit of a single whistle, walked past the scene of the miss with a smile on her face that the broadcast camera caught in full, and the entire sports internet immediately turned into the defining image of this rivalry in 2026.
Because she was crap in this game. A bag of crap. She was awful. Angel Reese was terrible. Speaking of terrible, Angel Reese never beating the allegations. This was to open the game.
With Reese leaking out, finds her.
Lee Sheet. That was awful. Wow, that was awful. One more good time. It did a... Yeah.
Right now, every platform is dissecting every frame of this game. The neck shove, the missed layup, the laugh, the overtime drama, the questionable foul call that almost handed Atlanta the whole thing back. We are breaking down every moment that made this the most talked about WNBA game of the season. And by the end, you will understand exactly why this rivalry refuses to cool off no matter how many times these two teams walk off the same floor. The physical flashpoint that defined this game did not arrive out of nowhere. It arrived after a specific sequence that set the competitive temperature for everything that followed.
For missing the game-winning layup! Helen Keller could have made the layup. It was the fucking second layup that she missed. She missed a wide open drive in the first quarter, and then she misses the game-winning layup. And then, of course, we have the halftime crew just glazing Angel Reese, making it seem like she's a better player than Kelsey Mitchell, making it seem like she's a better player than Caitlin Clark. and Angel Reese with the total brick of a three-pointer. No wonder why they left her wide open. Misses the layup. And look of disappointment on both her coach and teammates' face when she missed the game-winning layup. At least Angel was honest at halftime with Holly. I was a little bit impressed by that, where she was like, hey, I am playing like shit right now. I really got to step it up. I will say she is good on defense. She's always good on defense. She's a rebound machine. But
midway through the first quarter, Caitlin Clark pulled up from deep off the dribble with Angel Reese draped across her as tightly as a defender can contest a jump shot without making contact that draws a foul. This was not a lazy defensive effort. Reese was there. She was positioned correctly. She had made the read on the play and closed out with the kind of urgency you expect from a player who takes pride in her physical defensive presence. She did everything right on that possession, and the ball went in anyway. Clean through the net without touching either side of the rim on a pull-up three that Reese had done everything within her defensive toolkit to prevent.
Reese clocking Caitlin Clark right in the throat hole.
With just 35.
Right here, you're going to watch. There she gets her in the neck, and there she gets her in the throat. Yeah. What are we doing? Neck, throat.
That specific kind of moment carries a psychological weight that does not always show up on the stat sheet, but absolutely shows up in how a game unfolds from that point forward. When you do everything the right way defensively and a player still scores over your best effort, the competitive brain starts recalibrating. The frustration that builds from that recalibration does not always express itself in the most productive direction. For a player like Reese, whose entire identity on a basketball court is built around physical dominance and the ability to impose her will on the game through aggression and intensity, getting beaten clean by the player you are supposed to be containing has a specific kind of sting that rational basketball thinking does not always stay ahead of. And the early offensive struggles on the other end of the floor were not helping. Reese went 0 for 6 to open the game. Not 0 for 6 on difficult contested mid-range jumpers or rush transition attempts where the geometry of the shot was always going to be challenging. These were the kind of opportunities a player with her physical profile around the rim should be converting. Paint touches, short angles, the possessions that are supposed to be the foundational source of her offensive value in a game where she is not going to generate her points from the perimeter. When those shots are not falling early, when the player you came in to physically impose your will against is making threes over your best contest while you cannot finish the shots you are supposed to finish, the frustration accumulates in layers. And accumulated frustration in a rivalry this charged has a way of expressing itself in physical terms before the first quarter is even finished.
Look at how she hit Caitlin in the neck. Look, watch it. First time, look, second time. Bro, like, what are we doing? And then the refs act like they didn't see it. Like, bro, the refs in Atlanta got...
The stage was set, the temperature was already elevated, and the moment that would define the night was coming. Here is exactly what happened, and the details matter because the argument about what it was has been running across every sports platform since the game ended. Ryan Howard put up a shot that missed. Both Reese and Clark went for the loose ball underneath the basket in the kind of scramble that happens multiple times per game in a physical league where offensive rebounds are genuinely contested. That part of the sequence is standard basketball. Two players fighting for a live ball in the paint. Nothing about that requires any special examination.
Oh, Caitlin Clark is ridiculous, man, and in my opinion, she's the MVP right now. I mean, this performance by her was just insane, and look at this three right away in Angel Reese's face.
The switch on Reese will fire.
It's really obvious that these two do not like each other.
What happened next is where the standard basketball explanation stops working. Instead of using her body to establish position in the conventional box-out sense, using her lower body to seal Clark away from the ball while keeping her hands engaged with the actual task of securing the rebound, Reese drove her forearm directly into Clark's neck. Not her shoulder, not her chest, her neck. And not as an incidental consequence of two players jumping simultaneously and colliding on the way back down to the floor. This was a deliberate, directed push with a forearm to the throat area that had nothing to do with where the basketball was, and everything to do with removing Clark from the space Reese wanted to occupy.
Did y'all see that game? That was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Oh, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer individual. Angel Reese, probably the most despised person in the history of all sports, couldn't get a layup in. She tried the first time, couldn't get it. She tried the second time, couldn't get it. Even her teammates was like, come on, man. The third time at that point, the Indiana Fever just backed off. They're like, nah, come on, girl. I mean, we feel bad. Go ahead. She's like, I'm Jordan. No, I'm not. Meanwhile, mother freaking Kate Clark was laughing at her. She was like, the camera caught it. They even had to do a double take. She did the moonwalk. She was like, beat it.
The location of the officials when this happened is the part that makes the non-call so remarkable. This was not a play tucked into the corner where the angle from the nearest referee was obstructed by bodies and movement. It happened directly in the paint, under the basket. In the area of the floor that officiating crews are specifically positioned to monitor because it is where the most physical contact in basketball games occurs. Two referees were standing right there with sight lines that should have made this call as straightforward as anything they see over the course of a 40-minute game. Neither of them called a thing. Clark turned immediately to the officials with her arms out in the universal gesture of a player who just absorbed contact and cannot believe nothing was called about it. Her reaction was not theatrical. It was not the exaggerated performance of a player trying to manufacture a foul call through presentation. It was the immediate, instinctive response of someone who had just taken a forearm to the neck and looked to the people whose job it is to call exactly that kind of contact and found them looking the other way. Reese did not even bother checking whether a call was coming. She turned and jogged back up the floor with the same expression she would have had after a routine defensive stop. She knew nothing was coming, and nothing did.
Reese on a fast break. She sucks from three. Boom, whoa. Angel Reese on a layup. Can't score it. She stinks. Look at all these layups missed. The girl is awful. The girl is garbage. Here she comes. I'm going full court. Hey, boom, get that out of here. She sucks. Here comes Angel Reese coming down the lane again. Uh-oh, spinning and missing another layup. It's missing another layup. Here we go. She's looking for fouls. Here we go, down low. Uh-oh, I'm spinning. I'm missing another layup. The girl is horrible. The girl is terrible at the game. Here we come, coming down the lane. Here we go. I lost it out of bounds. Down low again, another layup opportunity. And she missed it. She's terrible. Here we go for three. Clank. Here we go. Game on the line. Uh-oh, I can win it. Smoke the layup. Then Naz Hillman follows up and smokes the layup. I mean, you starting to rub off on the other people on the roster.
The broader context sitting underneath this missed call is not incidental. This game was played in the middle of a period when the WNBA's handling of physical contact directed at Caitlin Clark had become one of the most discussed topics in sports media. The Deja Carrington incidents were still fresh in the collective memory of anyone paying attention to the league. The Alyssa Thomas throat punch on June 24th had just produced a week of reaction from everyone from Lisa Leslie to LaShawn McCoy to LeBron James's inner circle. The officiating crews working WNBA games were not operating in an information vacuum about how the league's handling of contact directed at Clark was being perceived externally. Against that backdrop, two referees with direct sightlines to a forearm being driven into Clark's neck, declining to blow the whistle, is a choice that produces its own set of questions that sit well beyond the specific game situation in which it occurred. The clip was moving before halftime. That is not a figure of speech about how quickly sports content travels in the current media environment. The forearm to the neck footage was being clipped, captioned, and shared across every major platform while the first half was still being played. By the time the halftime show was running, the clip had accumulated enough views to qualify as a genuine viral moment rather than a sports-specific story that stays within the fan community it originated from. The reaction it generated was striking specifically because of who it came from. The sports social media universe has developed a relatively clear pattern around Clark-related controversy. There is a segment that instinctively defends any physical contact directed at her as normal basketball, and a segment that instinctively characterizes it as targeted and excessive. That familiar split usually defines the online debate around these moments within the first hour of the clip circulating. What was different about the neck shove reaction was the number of people in the typically neutral middle who could not locate a defense for what they had watched. Fans who describe themselves as people who just want to watch good basketball without picking sides in the Clark-Reese rivalry were among the most emphatic voices, saying the forearm to the neck had no basketball justification. One reaction that circulated widely framed it this way: Reese is not a rebounder when she has to use technique and positioning. She is a player who grabs and shoves when the ball does not bounce her way. That specific read, connecting the physical aggression to a failure of conventional rebounding technique rather than treating it as an expression of competitive toughness, was the one that gained the most traction, with audiences trying to evaluate what they had seen without a predetermined conclusion already in place. The timing that made it sting even more for observers trying to be fair about it was unavoidable. The forearm to the neck came within minutes of Clark having scored over Reese's best defensive contest. When physical aggression follows a scoring sequence that tightly in a rivalry this charged, the narrative writes itself regardless of what the actual intent behind the contact was. The optics of that sequence, beaten clean on defense, forearm to the neck on the next possession, made the charitable interpretation of the shove very difficult for neutral observers to hold on to once they had watched the game's progression in context. While the conversation about the neck shove was consuming the social media environment, and while Atlanta was doing everything possible to keep the game competitive into the fourth quarter, Caitlin Clark was doing what Caitlin Clark does in the games that matter. 26 points, 9 assists. Those are the headline numbers, and they are genuinely impressive in isolation. But the context surrounding those numbers is what makes the performance land as something beyond a standard strong statistical line in a regular season game. Clark produced those numbers while absorbing physical contact that went uncalled on multiple occasions throughout the game. She produced them against a defense that had been specifically constructed and emotionally motivated to make her uncomfortable, to disrupt her rhythm, to force her into situations where the physical price of a good shot was higher than normal. She produced them while the game was fluctuating between comfortable lead and genuine threat for most of the second half and into overtime. Every point she scored came in a context where Atlanta had specific, urgent reasons to prevent it, and was applying every physical and tactical tool available to do exactly that. The 9 assists are the number that tends to get less attention than the scoring, but carries significant weight in evaluating what she actually contributed to Indiana's ability to win this game. 9 assists on a night when the Fever needed offensive contributions from multiple players to withstand Atlanta's push means Clark was finding teammates in positions to score even when the defense collapsed around her own shot attempts. The playmaking did not stop because the physical pressure elevated. It continued because the competitive level that generates those pressure situations is also the level at which her decision-making operates most effectively. The shot over Reese's contest in the opening minutes of the game set a tone that the rest of Clark's performance validated at every turn. Whatever physical discomfort Reese tried to create throughout the night, the contest on the three, the forearm to the neck, the accumulated physical pressure of guarding one of the most difficult players to guard in the league, Clark's shooting and decision-making did not register it in any way that showed up in the performance she delivered. That combination, physical pressure absorbed without apparent effect on production, is what separates the players who can operate at the highest level in rivalry games from the ones whose performance fluctuates based on the emotional temperature of the environment they are competing in. The box score version of Angel Reese's night looks complicated from a distance and becomes more uncomfortable the closer you examine it. 15 points, 14 rebounds, 6 assists. Those are the headline numbers, and taken in isolation, they represent a performance that most players in this league would accept on any given night. The rebounding total in particular reflects genuine physical effort and competitive tenacity across 40-plus minutes of a game that went all the way to overtime. 14 rebounds in a game this physical, against a team as well coached as Indiana, is not something that happens accidentally. It requires sustained engagement with every possession and the willingness to put your body into positions that are genuinely uncomfortable in the service of getting the ball. But the efficiency number underneath those headline figures is where the evening gets difficult to characterize charitably. 5 for 16 from the field overall. In a game where Reese's primary offensive contribution is supposed to come from high percentage shots in the paint, going 5 for 16 means that the physical edge she brings to every possession was not converting into the made baskets that justify the space it occupies on the shot chart. For a player whose entire offensive case rests on the argument that her physicality and positioning create reliable efficiency at the rim, going 5 for 16 is not a rough night that gets explained by shot quality or bad luck on shots that went halfway down and kicked out. It is a genuine performance problem that the box score documents in terms that cannot be softened by context. The 0 for 6 start was the foundation on which everything else built. When a player who relies on efficiency and physicality around the rim is 0 for 6 in the first portion of a game, against a team she has specific competitive motivation to perform well against, every subsequent miss carries compounding weight. Each one adds to the narrative that is forming in real time both among the fans watching and within the competitive psychology of the player experiencing it. By the time the fourth quarter arrived with Atlanta in genuine need of every offensive contribution available, Reese was already carrying the weight of a shooting night that had not gone the way it needed to go for the Dream's chances to hold up. The 6 assists are the number that complicates the simple narrative of a bad night, because they reflect a player who was engaged with the game's flow and making reads that benefited teammates even when her own shot was not falling. A player who disappears from a game entirely when things go wrong does not accumulate 6 assists in a game that goes to overtime. Reese was present and engaged throughout. The problem was not effort or competitive commitment. The problem was that when the game's final moment arrived and her effort had put her in exactly the position she needed to be in, with the ball, at the rim, with a chance to win it, the shot did not go in. Before getting to the moment that everyone is talking about, it is worth acknowledging that Atlanta gave Indiana a genuinely competitive game and nearly stole it in a way that would have reframed the entire narrative of the night. Alicia Gray was the reason. She put together a career-high 32 points on a night when Atlanta needed someone to step forward and carry the offensive load against one of the better defensive teams in the league. Gray's performance was not a product of easy looks or uncontested shots. It was the result of sustained offensive execution against a defense that was working hard to take away exactly what she was doing. A career high in a game this competitive, with this much at stake in terms of rivalry positioning and standings implications, is the kind of performance that deserves acknowledgement independently of everything else that happened around it. What Gray's scoring did was keep Atlanta in a game that Indiana was trying to put away and could not. Every time the Fever pushed the lead to a comfortable margin in the fourth quarter, Gray or someone else from the Dream found a response that brought it back within striking distance. The back-and-forth rhythm of that stretch created the conditions for the game's final dramatic sequence. A tied score, a clock running down, and a loose ball scramble that put the outcome in Reese's hands at the worst possible moment for anyone who needed her to make the play. The score stood at 81 apiece with the clock running towards 0 when Ryan Howard's three-point attempt came off the rim. What happened next was a sequence of events that gave Atlanta every opportunity to walk out of that building with a win. The offensive rebound, the putback attempt, the follow-up attempt. 3 separate chances to end the game right there, 2 of them at point-blank range, and none of them converted. The Dream had done the hard part, staying competitive against a team that had been trying to end the game for the better part of an 8-minute stretch, and then could not finish it when the ball was sitting there waiting to be finished. Let's reconstruct this sequence precisely because the details of it are even more remarkable than the summary version suggests. Ryan Howard fires the 3. It misses badly off the front rim. The ball is live and both teams are scrambling for position in the paint with 3 seconds left and the game tied. This is the moment where the physical work Reese had been doing all night, fighting for position, using her body to create space, putting in the rebounding effort that her box score line reflects, was supposed to pay off in the most direct way possible. She got the rebound. With Aaliyah Boston riding her back through the entire scramble, Reese somehow ripped the ball out of traffic and had it in her hands at the rim. Point blank, the game sitting right there. All the physical effort, all the competitive intensity, all the frustration from a shooting night that had not gone the way she needed it to go, all of it could have been resolved in one clean finish at the basket. The putback attempt did not come close. It was not a shot that went halfway in and kicked out on bad luck. It was a shot that did not reach the front rim, a flat, short attempt from a player who had the ball directly beneath the basket with 3 seconds left in a tied game that her team desperately needed to win. The kind of miss that produces a specific silence in an arena because the crowd processes what just happened before the noise of a normal miss would have time to register. The ball bounced free. Naz Hillman scrambled to it in a desperate attempt to extend the possession and launched a follow-up of her own. Aaliyah Boston reached back and swatted it into the stands. Overtime. 2 attempts at point-blank range to win the game on the largest stage this rivalry has produced this season. Neither one converted. All the physical edge Reese had brought to every possession across 40 minutes of basketball, the aggression, the rebounding intensity, the physical imposing of her will on the game, had put her in the exact position she needed to be in to be the hero of the night. And in the moment that required finishing rather than fighting, the finish was not there. The way Reese stood under the basket in the aftermath, hands on her head, surrounded by teammates, in that specific posture that every athlete in every sport knows as the physical expression of disbelief at a missed opportunity, was the image that immediately started competing with the missed layup itself for the defining visual of the night. She had understood what just happened before the overtime buzzer had finished sounding. The moment was there. She had it, and it was gone. The broadcast made a choice in the immediate aftermath of the missed putback, and that choice produced the image that defined this entire game across every sports platform for the next 24 hours. As Reese stood under the basket processing what had just happened, the camera found Caitlin Clark walking back toward the Indiana Fever bench. She was not in a neutral expression of relief or the focused composure of a player trying to stay locked into a game that had just gone to overtime. She was laughing. An actual, open, genuine laugh. Head back, clearly amused by the sequence that had just unfolded directly in front of her during the most consequential possession of the game to that point. The image was immediate rocket fuel for every corner of sports social media that was already engaged with this rivalry. Within minutes of the broadcast cutting to that reaction shot, it had been clipped, captioned, and distributed across every platform with enough velocity to make it one of the most shared sports images of the week, across both the WNBA's core audience and the broader sports media environment. The interpretations varied based almost entirely on whose side of the rivalry the person doing the interpreting was on. For Clark supporters, the laugh was the natural reaction of a competitor who had just watched the player who had shoved a forearm into her neck earlier in the same game miss a point-blank putback in a tied game, the kind of competitive irony that produces genuine amusement in real time, regardless of what the professional standard for composed reactions is supposed to look like. For Reese supporters, the laugh was disrespectful, an unnecessary public display at a moment when a competitor was visibly distressed by a missed opportunity that had real professional consequences. What neither side could dispute is the effect the image produced in terms of how the narrative of the game settled in the public consciousness. The missed layup was already the defining moment of the game from a basketball standpoint. Clark's reaction to it made the missed layup the defining moment of the game from a rivalry standpoint. The two things together, the miss and the laugh, collapsed the entire competitive drama of 40-plus minutes of basketball into a single visual that communicated the current state of this rivalry with more clarity than any analytical breakdown could have managed. For a rivalry that has been defined as much by personality and competitive theater as by basketball outcomes, the moment was almost cinematically perfect in how it captured the dynamic between the two players at the center of it. Reese had done everything she could physically to impose herself on the game. Clark had absorbed it and kept performing. And when the physical intensity produced its most dramatic moment, the basketball outcome went against the player who had spent the night trying to use physicality to change the competitive equation. The game going to overtime with both teams running almost entirely on emotion and competitive will set up a final stretch that nearly undid everything Indiana had built across 4 quarters of survival basketball. The Fever managed to establish a lead in the overtime period. Enough of a cushion that with 10 seconds left, they appeared to be in control of the outcome they had spent the entire game working toward. What happened next tested that control in a way that briefly made the result feel genuinely uncertain. Officials called a foul on Clark. The call sent Ryan Howard to the line for 3 free throw attempts with 10 seconds remaining, and Indiana leading by what should have been a comfortable enough margin to absorb one bad possession. Indiana challenged the call immediately. The broadcast crew calling the game said out loud on air that they expected it to be overturned, that the footage looked soft enough that a review would produce the reversal that the situation warranted. The language used by the broadcasters in real time was not ambiguous about where they expected the review to land. Officials went to the monitor. They reviewed the footage with the same technology available to everyone watching at home and to every analyst who would subsequently examine the call from multiple angles and conclude that it was the kind of contact that gets waved off the vast majority of the time in this specific game situation. And then they upheld it. Howard stepped to the line and made all 3 free throws. The lead that had been comfortable became a lead of 2 points with 10 seconds left, and Atlanta now possessing both the ball and a mathematical path back to a tie that would extend the game further and give the Dream a second overtime opportunity that nothing about the previous 4 quarters suggested they deserved. The reaction from Indiana fans watching from inside the building and across the broadcast audience was the specific kind of outrage that comes from watching a competitive outcome feel like it is being taken away by officiating rather than by the other team's basketball performance. Atlanta had missed 2 point-blank opportunities to win the game in regulation. Indiana had survived those misses and built a lead in overtime, and now the officiating crew had just handed Atlanta a path back into the game by upholding a call that the broadcast crew, the coaches, the players, and the overwhelming majority of people watching at home had concluded was the wrong one. The sequence that followed may have been the clearest single illustration of what separates Caitlin Clark from the noise surrounding any given game she plays in. Atlanta fouled immediately to stop the clock after Howard's free throws cut the lead to 2. The foul landed on Clark. She was going to the line with 9.8 seconds remaining, Indiana leading by 2, the entire game's outcome sitting on 2 free throw attempts from the player who had been the center of every controversy, every physical moment, and every piece of competitive theater across the previous 40-plus minutes of basketball. She made both of them. Not with the kind of tentative execution that sometimes shows up when a player is feeling the weight of a situation, and the mechanics of the shot reflect the pressure rather than the preparation. Both free throws went in cleanly, without drama, without hesitation, without any visible acknowledgement that the stakes attached to those 2 shots were any different from the stakes attached to a first-quarter free throw in a game that was not particularly close. The lead went back to 4. Atlanta got one more possession with no timeouts, launched something desperate from distance that had no realistic chance of going in, and Indiana walked off the floor with a victory that had required surviving a hostile whistle, a genuinely dangerous late-game threat, and the physical intensity of a rivalry game where the opponent came in specifically motivated to end their winning stretch. The final box score read 95-91, 26 points and 9 assists for Clark, 15 points, 14 rebounds, and 6 assists for Reese. 2 entirely different competitive stories sitting inside the same set of numbers. One player had done the physical work. The other had done the winning work. And in a rivalry where both of those things have been claimed as the more important contribution depending on which side of the conversation you are on, the final score tends to settle the argument more definitively than any analytical position. The free throw sequence was the perfect close to a game that had been defined throughout by the question of what actually matters when everything is on the line. Physical imposing of will, aggressive rebounding, competitive intensity directed at disrupting a specific opponent, all of that has value. None of it substitutes for making shots when the game needs them made. Clark made hers. When the game needed them most, at the line with 9.8 seconds left and 2 points separating Indiana from overtime survival, she stepped up and finished. That is the competitive fact that every piece of rivalry theater, every viral image, every missed layup, and every uncalled foul gets measured against at the end of 40-plus minutes of professional basketball. Zoom out from the individual drama for a moment, because this game was not just a rivalry spectacle with viral moments attached to it. It was a game with genuine standings implications for two teams in the middle of a legitimate playoff push, and the result carries weight that extends well beyond the social media conversation it generated. Atlanta came into this matchup needing to close ground on Indiana in the standings. A win here would have represented meaningful movement in the positioning battle that will determine playoff seeding and the competitive path each team faces in the postseason. They had the talent to make it happen. Gray's career night proved that. And they had the opportunity in the game's final moments to take it. The fact that they walked away without the result they came for, despite generating multiple legitimate chances to win the game in regulation, makes the loss sting in a way that a standard mid-season defeat would not. For Indiana, the win extended a stretch of results that has positioned them as a genuine postseason threat, rather than a team benefiting primarily from one player's individual brilliance. The Fever had to survive everything Atlanta threw at them: Gray's career performance, the uncalled neck shove, the questionable overtime foul call, the 2-point-blank misses in regulation that could have sent them home with a loss, and they still found a way to close it out. That kind of resilience in a hostile road environment against a motivated rival is the marker of a team whose competitive identity extends beyond any single player's contribution on any given night. The physical toll these two teams keep putting on each other in these matchups is worth acknowledging as its own subplot. Every time the Fever and the Dream meet, the contact level runs significantly higher than the league average for regular season games. Players from both sides absorb physical punishment across 40-plus minutes that accumulates over the course of a season in ways that box scores do not capture. The Indiana roster has been dealing with injury management as a consistent challenge, and games played at this physical intensity against Atlanta carry a wear and tear cost that extends beyond the immediate outcome into the larger picture of roster availability and physical condition heading into the postseason. Both teams know the other one well enough at this point that the tactical chess match underneath the physical intensity has become genuinely sophisticated. Atlanta's game planning around Clark has evolved significantly from their early matchups. Indiana's defensive approach to Reese and Atlanta's supporting cast reflects the same kind of accumulated knowledge that only develops through repeated head-to-head competition over multiple seasons. The rivalry has reached the stage where both sides have enough information about the other to make the adjustments that separate good teams from great ones in late-season basketball. What happened on this specific night suggests that Indiana is currently executing at the higher level, but Atlanta is close enough that the margin could easily flip in the next matchup. What this game produced in terms of viral moments and social media conversation is the version most people will remember when this rivalry comes up in highlight discussions years from now. The neck shove, the missed layup, the laugh, the questionable foul call, the free throws at 9.8 seconds. These are the images and moments that get attached to a rivalry game when it reaches the cultural saturation level this one achieved. But underneath all of that noise, the game settled something important about where these two players currently exist in relation to each other as competitors. If you're enjoying the video so far, take a second to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. Angel Reese brought everything she has to this game. She brought the physical intensity that defines her competitive identity. She fought for offensive rebounds in traffic that most players in this league would not have come away with. She accumulated 14 rebounds against one of the better defensive rebounding teams in the league. She created the specific moment that should have been her signature memory of the night. Ball in her hands, at the rim, game tied, 3 seconds left. Every physical thing she had done across 40 minutes of basketball had put her in that position. And when it came time to finish the physical work with a basketball play, the shot did not go in. That is the hardest possible way for a competitive night to end. Not because of effort or positioning, or the physical imposing of will, because the ball did not go through the basket when the game needed it to. Caitlin Clark absorbed the physical pressure, logged the uncalled contact, produced 26 points and 9 assists, and then stepped to the free throw line with 9.8 seconds left and made both shots without blinking. The entire game's outcome sitting on those 2 attempts and the execution matching the moment perfectly. That is the competitive signature that the rivalry's current dynamic reflects back when you look at it honestly. The neck shove and the missed layup will be in the conversation for weeks. The laugh will be in the conversation longer than that. But what will be in the standings at the end of this season is the result. And that result belongs to Indiana. Tell us in the comments where this rivalry goes from here. Does Atlanta find a way to flip the dynamic in the next matchup? And was Clark's reaction to the missed layup the right call? Or did it cross a line that the rivalry did not need crossed? Drop it below.